Canada, and I had to say, it doesn't normally.
Air is contaminated
and by Thursday, Detroit
and Central Texas in the mid.
Been getting hazier and hazier. Smoke could cause this smoke to stick around for a whole lot longer. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on this forecast here at Fox Weather. In the meantime, folks in the Midwest, in the Northeast.
Good. Smoke from more than 180 wildfires burning across Canada has drifted south, settling over the Midwest and the Northeast, and reaching all the way to New York City. At the very same time, Central Texas is confronting a very different emergency, a life-threatening flood that has already forced dozens of rescues. Two extremes are unfolding together, and they are putting a wide stretch of the United States under real pressure. The question I want to answer today is direct. How did so much of the country end up facing danger from opposite directions at once, and what could happen next? Let me start in the north, because that is where this chapter of the story begins. Firefighting aircraft, including water bombers and helicopters, are now being deployed against a sprawling network of fires burning across Canada. The scale is significant. When more than 180 separate fires are active at the same time, the smoke they produce does not stay in one place. It rises, it catches the wind, and it travels across the border into the United States, carrying fine particles that can affect air quality far from the flames themselves. That is exactly what has happened here, and it is why communities that are nowhere near an active fire are still dealing with the consequences this week. The immediate development is the smoke and how far it is spread. Skies turned an unsettling orange across a broad corridor, from Toronto and the area around Niagara Falls eastward toward Boston, where residents described a scene that looked almost otherworldly. This is not simply a matter of appearance. When the sky changes color like that, it is a visible sign that the air itself has changed and that people breathing it may start to feel the effects. Some residents in affected areas reported that breathing felt more strained than usual, and a few described a slight burning sensation in the chest.
In the upstate in New England yet either. The current AQIs, the air quality indices, are very much in the unhealthy range, unhealthy for all groups, not.
Those are the kinds of symptoms officials say can appear when wildfire smoke settles over a populated area. Let me be precise about the geography, because the reach of this smoke is one of the most important details.
A look at the skies out in the Northeast. We're talking New Jersey, New York, all being impacted thanks to these Canadian wildfires.
Air quality alerts have now been issued across more than a dozen states. In the upper Midwest, the haze became thick enough in places that visibility dropped sharply. In Michigan, a bridge that would normally be clearly visible was nearly impossible to see through the smoke, which gives you a sense of how dense the air became. That kind of reduced visibility is not only a health concern, it can also affect driving conditions and outdoor activity, which is part of why authorities have been urging caution. There is another layer to the northern story that deserves attention, and it involves fires burning inside the United States as well. Smoke has also been spreading from fires in Minnesota, including within the Superior National Forest. What stands out to me here is a warning from one official about how long these fires may last. According to that official, some of the fires in that region could keep burning for months. The expectation described was that fire could remain on the ground in some form, along with smoke, until snow arrives later in the year. If that assessment holds, it means the smoke problem may not be a brief episode that clears in a day or two, but a condition that returns repeatedly through the season. That brings us to the health side of this, which is really the core of why the smoke matters for ordinary people. Wildfire smoke is not uniform in its effects. It poses the greatest risk to what officials describe as sensitive groups. Medical guidance shared during this event indicated that people in those groups may experience more coughing, a tightness in the chest, more wheezing, and difficulty breathing. These are not exotic warnings. They are practical descriptions of what can happen when fine smoke particles are inhaled over time, particularly by those who already have respiratory or heart conditions, as well as older adults and young children. The timing makes this more complicated, and I want to explain why. The smoke has arrived at the same time as a heat wave, which means high temperatures are layered on top of poor air quality.
million hectares of land.
That combination is difficult because heat on its own already pushes people to seek relief, and normally that might mean spending time outdoors or keeping windows open. But when the outdoor air is filled with smoke, those instincts can work against a person's health. Officials have responded by urging people to limit their time outside, which is a way of trying to reduce two risks at once, the heat and the smoke, without either one being ignored. Let me pause here to connect the dots on what is confirmed and what remains uncertain. What is confirmed is that the fires are burning, that the smoke has spread across state lines, that alerts are in place across more than a dozen states, and that officials are advising caution. What is less certain is exactly how long these conditions will persist. The warning that some fires could burn until snowfall is an assessment from an official, not a guaranteed outcome, and wildfire behavior can shift with weather, wind, and firefighting efforts. So the honest way to frame it is this: the immediate situation is serious, and it may continue, but the exact duration is not something anyone can promise with certainty.
So a lot of people are coming here to try and take some pictures, but everyone's been still in good spirits. We've been chatting with some people, and they were wondering what the smoke was, so I had to explain to them what was going on.
Now I want to turn the story in a different direction, because at the same time this smoke is drifting across the north and east, Central Texas is dealing with an emergency that is almost the opposite in nature. Instead of dry conditions and fire, the problem there is water, and a great deal of it. The available information describes something close to half a year's worth of rain falling in a matter of days. That is an enormous amount of water in a short window, and when rain falls that quickly, the ground and the rivers cannot absorb it fast enough. The result has been dangerous flooding that has trapped people inside homes and vehicles. The human impact in Texas has already been significant. According to information shared by officials, more than 75 people have been rescued as the flooding intensified. The expected rainfall during this event was described as potentially exceeding 30 inches, which officials noted would be more than what fell during a serious flood in the region the previous year. That comparison is worth sitting with for a moment. When emergency officials say the current rainfall could surpass a flood that people already remember as devastating, it signals just how serious they consider the present threat to be. The stories of individual rescues help make the scale of this real without exaggerating it. One woman had to be rescued after floodwaters swamped her vehicle, leaving her on the roof of the car as the water rose around it. In one Central Texas community, residents described how quickly the situation turned, with a nearby river rising so fast that it overwhelmed its banks in only minutes. That speed is one of the most dangerous features of flash flooding. It does not give people much time to react, which is why so many rescues become necessary in such a short span. The danger has not been limited to a single town. In Uvalde, a man had to be pulled to safety from the rising water, and the broader region has been dealing with multiple storms at once. That layering of hazards is important because it means emergency crews are not responding to one problem in one place, but to several serious situations spread across a wide area at the same time.
So as these impacts are being felt from the Canadian wildfires. All right.
When resources are stretched like that, coordination becomes essential, and the margin for error narrows. There is another element to the Texas emergency that added a sudden and violent dimension to the flooding, and that is a tornado. A tornado touched down in San Antonio and moved across a busy interstate. In its path, it sparked power lines, sent debris into the air, and tore the roof off an apartment building, with damage also reported to multiple businesses. A tornado crossing a major highway in a populated area is a serious public safety event on its own. When it happens in the middle of a flood emergency, it compounds the danger and makes an already difficult response even harder to manage. Officials have been clear that the threat was not over, even as these events unfolded. Overnight warnings indicated that more rain remained in the forecast, and one official urged continued caution, describing the possibility that the weather could return with renewed force. That is the kind of message that matters, because floods often produce their worst outcomes when people believe the danger has passed and let their guard down. The warning to stay cautious is a reminder that the situation was still developing and that additional rainfall could change conditions quickly. The response has stretched beyond Texas itself, which tells you something about the severity. Neighboring states have stepped in to help. Louisiana and Oklahoma both sent rescue crews to assist with the effort in Texas. When states dispatch personnel across their borders to support another state's emergency response, it usually reflects a judgment that local resources alone may not be enough to meet the scale of the crisis. It is also a practical example of how emergencies of this size tend to pull in help from a wider region rather than being handled by one community on its own. Let me now step back and connect these two very different emergencies, because I think that connection is part of why this story is drawing so much attention. On one side of the country, you have fire and smoke, dry heat, and warnings to stay indoors to protect the lungs. On the other side, you have overwhelming rain, flash flooding, water rescues, and even a tornado.
The winds, the speed, the direction. So we're hopefully going to see a lot of this smoke moving out of the northeast in the next 48 hours or so, but just a slight switch in the wind.
These are opposite kinds of extreme weather, and yet they are happening in overlapping time frames, affecting different populations across the United States at once.
Long periods of time, it is not good for the lungs, for everybody, especially for those that are also sensitive to this kind of air quality as well. It's not only New York, though. We're seeing this all.
That simultaneity is unusual enough to make people pay attention, and it raises practical questions about how communities and emergency systems handle multiple large events at the same time. To understand why the smoke reached so far, we need to look at the basic mechanics of what is happening. Wildfires produce smoke made up of fine particles, and when large numbers of fires burn simultaneously, they generate a great deal of it. Weather patterns then carry that smoke over long distances. This is why a person in New York City can be affected by fires that are burning hundreds of miles away in Canada. The fire does not have to be nearby for the air to be affected. That is the key idea that explains how a wildfire event in one country becomes an air quality event in cities across another. There is a broader pattern worth noting here as well, and I want to be careful to describe it accurately rather than overstate it. Cross-border smoke events like this one have become a recognizable feature of recent fire seasons, in which large fires in Canada send haze into American cities well beyond the immediate fire zones. What makes the current situation notable is the combination: the number of active fires, the distance the smoke has traveled, the number of states under air quality alerts, and the fact that it is coinciding with a heat wave in some regions and catastrophic flooding in another.
Phil DeCastro, Fox 11 News.
And here's some of the biggest impacts that are happening. Worst air in the nation. It's being put out there by...
I am not suggesting a single cause ties all of this together. I am pointing out that the overlap is what makes this a story worth following closely. Let me turn now to the question many people watching will naturally ask. What should you actually do when smoke like this settles over your area? Officials have offered practical guidance during this event, and the core advice is straightforward. People are being urged to limit time outdoors, particularly during the hottest and smokiest parts of the day, and sensitive groups are being encouraged to take extra care. In New York City, authorities took an additional step by distributing free KN95 masks at libraries across the city, giving residents a way to reduce their exposure to the fine particles in the air. That kind of measure is a signal that officials consider the air quality serious enough to warrant hands-on assistance. I want to be precise about what those masks can and cannot do, because it helps set realistic expectations. A well-fitted mask of that type is designed to filter out many fine particles, which is the main concern with wildfire smoke. It is a protective tool, not a complete solution, and it works best alongside other steps like staying indoors when possible and keeping indoor air as clean as conditions allow. The decision to hand out masks for free is significant, mainly because it lowers the barrier for people who might not otherwise have access, which matters most for those who are outdoors for work or who lack the resources to prepare in advance. For the people most directly affected, the practical consequences are immediate. In the smoke-affected regions, that includes anyone with breathing difficulties, older residents, young children, and outdoor workers who cannot simply move their day indoors. In the flood-affected areas of Central Texas, the consequences are even more acute, involving damaged homes, stranded vehicles, and the risk that comes with fast-rising water. Emergency crews, including those sent from Louisiana and Oklahoma, are carrying much of the weight of the response, and residents in the hardest-hit communities face the difficult work of recovery once the water recedes. There is also a wider set of people watching this closely for reasons beyond immediate safety. Local and state officials have to manage resources across multiple emergencies. Communities near the fires in Minnesota are being told to prepare for the possibility of a long season. Residents in cities like Boston and New York are adjusting daily routines around air quality. And in Texas, families in flood zones are dealing with the direct loss and disruption that comes with an event of this magnitude. Each of these groups experiences the same broad story in a very different and personal way, which is part of why it resonates so widely. Let me address the questions that remain open, because being honest about uncertainty is more useful than pretending everything is settled. It is not yet fully clear how long the smoke conditions will last, since that depends on how the fires behave and how the weather moves the smoke in the coming days. It is also not yet clear how much additional rain will fall in central Texas, and officials warned that more was in the forecast, which means the flood emergency could evolve further before it eases. What is clear is that both situations were still active and being managed at the time this information was shared, and that authorities were treating both as ongoing threats rather than events that had already concluded. I want to be careful here to separate what officials have described from what would be speculation. The warning that certain fires could burn until snowfall is an official assessment, and it may prove accurate, but wildfire seasons can change with conditions.
Fire crews and nearly 50 firefighting aircrafts are battling the blazes. Now, satellites.
The expectation of rainfall exceeding 30 inches in Texas is a forecast figure that officials cited, and forecasts can shift. The rescues, the mask distribution, the deployment of aircraft, and the cross-state assistance are confirmed actions that have already taken place. Keeping that distinction clear matters because it lets you follow the story without mistaking a projection for a finished outcome. The timing of all this is especially important, and it is one of the reasons I keep returning to it. These events are converging during a stretch when heat is already straining parts of the country, when fire season in the north is active, and when heavy rain has created flash flood conditions in the south. That convergence increases the load on emergency systems, and it makes public communication harder because officials are trying to deliver different and sometimes opposite advice to different regions at the same time. In smoke-affected areas, the message is largely about staying inside and protecting your lungs. In flood zones, the message is about moving to safety and heeding rescue instructions.
A severe wildfire season in Canada, where more than 130 wildfires are burning across northwestern Ontario, with at least 60 out of control.
Both are urgent, and both are happening now. There is a broader economic and community dimension worth acknowledging as well, though I will describe it carefully rather than assign firm figures the information does not provide.
If you can't be out here.
Air quality index readings reached the very unhealthy level by early afternoon, the second highest level on that scale. At that point, people with lung and heart.
Events like these tend to disrupt daily life in ways that extend beyond the immediate danger. Smoke can affect outdoor work, travel, and public events. Flooding can damage property, roads, and businesses, as we saw with the tornado that struck multiple businesses in San Antonio. The full extent of that disruption often becomes clearer only after the immediate emergency passes, which is one more reason this story is likely to keep developing for some time. What happens next will depend on several factors, and I want to lay them out plainly.
Dana Hollitz with A Design Journey is cautiously optimistic.
I'm hoping we'll still get people. I think it'll still be busy no matter what, but it does worry me.
In the north, it will depend on how successfully firefighting crews and aircraft can contain the fires, and on how the wind carries the smoke in the days ahead. If the fires persist as one official suggested they might, then periodic smoke events could return through the season. In Texas, it will depend heavily on whether the additional forecasted rain materializes and on how quickly the floodwaters recede. If more rain falls, the emergency could intensify. If the weather breaks, the focus will shift toward recovery. Those are the conditions to watch, and they will shape how this story unfolds. Let me also speak to the role of officials and agencies, because their actions are central to how this plays out. The deployment of water bombers and helicopters in Canada, the issuance of air quality alerts across more than a dozen American states, the distribution of masks in New York City, and the movement of rescue crews from Louisiana and Oklahoma into Texas all represent coordinated responses to a fast-moving set of threats. What each of these steps has in common is an attempt to reduce harm quickly. None of them ends the underlying emergency, but together they reflect a system working to protect people while the fires burn and the water rises. As I bring this together, I want to underline what has actually changed, because that is the heart of why this is news right now. What changed is that Canadian wildfire smoke reached deep into the United States, blanketing the Midwest and the Northeast and prompting alerts as far as New York City, at the same moment that Central Texas was overwhelmed by rainfall heavy enough to force more than 75 rescues and to draw help from neighboring states. The simultaneous arrival of these two extremes, fire and smoke in one region and dangerous flooding in another, is the development that turned a series of local weather events into a national story. What remains unresolved is just as important as what has been confirmed. The duration of the smoke is uncertain, the total rainfall in Texas is still unfolding, and the full damage from the flooding and the tornado will take time to assess. Officials have been clear that both situations were active and potentially still worsening, which is why the guidance to stay cautious, to limit outdoor exposure where smoke is present, and to follow rescue instructions where flooding is present, continued to apply. This is a situation defined as much by what is still to come as by what has already happened. For anyone watching from an affected area, the most useful thing to focus on is the practical guidance from local officials, because conditions vary from place to place. In smoke-affected regions, that means paying attention to air quality alerts and taking the recommended precautions, especially for sensitive groups. In flood-affected regions, it means treating warnings about additional rain seriously and not assuming the danger has passed. These events have shown how quickly conditions can change, whether it is a river rising within minutes or smoke thickening enough to hide a bridge from view. I will end where I began, with the broad picture.
Apartment building torn off, hitting multiple businesses. Officials warning overnight that the threat was not over, with more rain in the forecast.
Looks like with a vengeance.
A large stretch of North America is dealing with severe weather from two opposite directions at the same time, and both the wildfire smoke drifting south from Canada and the flooding in central Texas remain active concerns that could still shift in the days ahead. This is a developing situation, and the next round of official updates, whether on fire containment in the north or additional rainfall in the south, will help clarify where things are heading. Thank you for watching my report on the Canadian wildfire smoke now affecting parts of the United States, including New York City, alongside the dangerous flooding in central Texas. This remains a developing situation, and the next official updates on air quality, fire containment, and rainfall could change the picture significantly. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can follow the latest verified updates as these events continue to unfold across the country.